Hey, everybody. Sam Amico, hoopswire.com, Hoopswire Live, here on 330 to go. Welcome back. I just, maybe 5-10 minutes ago, got back from the CAVS really season opening press conference with Koby Altman and new head coach Kenny Atkinson. I was there at the CAVS practice facility in Independence. And had, as the media did, all the other media members were there. Saw a lot of people there that I was surprised because the Browns also have media availability today. So I was a little surprised. It was pretty packed for Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson. Asked them some stuff. They had some good answers. Explained some things. Actual media day with the players is Monday, the big so-called media day. And they're actually doing it a little differently this year, obviously having Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson greet the media, 3-4 days in advance of everybody else. So I'm going to touch on that, talk a lot about that. But before we get to that, I've got a little bit of CAVS history here. This was a landmark day in the franchise history today, September 27th, 29 years ago. On this day, the Cavaliers traded Mark Price to the Washington Bullets, which at the time I was not living in town. I was in Wyoming, starting my first job. So I didn't pay much attention to it, but I looked it up, and Mark was traded to the Bullets. Kind of the end of his run was that 94-95 season. I don't want to say he was on the decline, but the Cavs were moving in a different direction under Mike Fratello than the coach. Terrell Brandon had kind of emerged as their starting point guard. They were just going in a different direction. So they traded Mark Price on this date 29 years ago to the Washington Bullets. In return, they got a first-round pick, and the Cavs later used that pick to draft center Vitaly Potapenko. Vitaly Potapenko was who the Cavs got later. They drafted him in that Mark Price trade. And interestingly, Vitaly Potapenko did play for the Cavs, was one of those energy, physical centers, backup center for most of his career. Played for a few other teams. Well, guess what? Vitaly Potapenko, and I never thought I'd have to say that name like 6 times in my entire life, and I'm doing it on one show. He is now an assistant coach, just took an assistant coach's job, Vitaly, with J.B. Bickerstaff and the Detroit Pistons. So there's a lot of Cavs connections there to that Mark Price trade. I have here in the September 28th, which would have been the next day after the trade, 1995. Interestingly, this is in the Spokesman Review, which I believe is in the state of Washington. But anyway, I found a Mark Price quote about the trade. So I'm going to read it to you. The Bullets, who had the worst record in the Eastern Conference last season, had been seeking a high-profile veteran point guard to work with their talented young front court, which includes Rasheed Wallace, second-year player Juwan Howard. This is how long ago this was. Juwan Howard finally retired at like the age of 46. And third-year pro Chris Webber. Those were the Bullets. Mark Price went to that team. Here's what Mark had to say about it. He told WUAB TV Channel 43 in Cleveland. This is what Mark said on the day of the trade. I was like, wow. I told my wife, and we kind of sat there and we're like, well, now what do we do? There are so many mixed emotions. We really loved our time here in Cleveland. Interestingly, sadly, Mark only played 7 games for the Bullets. I can't remember whether it was a knee injury. I saw Terry Pluto today at the CAVS press conference, and I mentioned this trade to him, and I said, was it a knee injury? And he said he thought maybe it was a broken wrist or something. So we don't know why, but Mark only played 7 games with the Bullets. At the end of that season, he was a free agent. He signed with the Golden State Warriors way back before anybody in Cleveland really even knew who the Golden State Warriors were. And Mark had a nice run with them. I believe that was the 96, 97 season with Chris Mullin was on that team. I believe, who else was on that team? Latrell Sprewell, who later choked PJ Carlesimo as coach at practice. But Mark had a nice run with the Warriors, and then he was traded to the Orlando Magic. And I didn't look up Mark's stats with the Orlando Magic, but then he was released after that, waived after the season with the Magic, and ended up retiring. I believe that was 1997-98 season. So he would have retired in 98. And you know what's funny is I filled in for Mark on Monday on the Mark Price podcast. I went on the Mark Price podcast in place of Mark to talk mostly about Mark. And I did not bring this up. So there's some exclusive history for you on the 330 to go Hoops Wire live show. So that's banner day in Cavs history. And you know what? I didn't even notice the trade because September 26th, 1995, I was in Wyoming covering high school sports, probably Wyoming football, and some Wyoming basketball, University of Wyoming. So I was far removed when Mark got traded, which I remember thinking I wasn't real happy about it. But at the same time, I kind of thought, yeah, the Cavs seemingly have been going in a different direction. Okay, speaking of different directions, the Cavaliers of today had their press conference today. I'll touch on that in a second. Wasn't a whole lot, kind of, hey, we're starting again. There were little details in there, though, that I'll pass along. And then, as I said, Monday is media day. Tuesday, the start of Cavaliers training camp. They are going to Bradenton, Florida at IMG Academy. Now, that is a question that I did ask at the press conference today. I asked Koby Altman. First of all, I said to Koby Altman, hey, for the first time in franchise history, the Cavs are going out of state for training camp. Well, the Cavs have been around since 1970, so 54 years. This is the first time they've gone out of state for camp. You know what he said? Are you sure? Is that right? He's looking around. He looked at the Cavs PR person. He said, is that right? And the PR person said, yes, that's correct. And I said into the microphone to Koby Altman, don't ever doubt me when it comes to Cavs history and franchise history. Okay? I've been around longer than you, pal. I didn't throw in the I've been around longer than you, pal, but that's what I was thinking. He just kind of laughed. But yeah, so they're going to Bradenton, Florida for training camp, which I asked them, are you still going? Because obviously, terribly, and as I've read a lot about on 330 to go, the hurricane hit there, and Bradenton wasn't too badly impacted, though I did read earlier that they had that the local government officials in Bradenton there'd been some flooding and were kind of warning about water shortages there, but they suspect it's all going to be cleared up by Tuesday. It's now the aftermath of the storm there. So the Cavs are still going down there. And Koby Altman basically said, it's a great way for us to bond. We're going to be, and I mentioned this before, kind of keep everything tight in our circle. And all the players are there. There's no distractions or any of that. Not many media members from Cleveland are going. I know 3 who are going. I am not. The Cavs are going to have their players available and their coaches available on Zoom for media who is not going because of the training camp in Florida. Now, they're just going there from the October 1st through the 6th. Can you believe that? We're in October already, just about. I love October. It's my second favorite month. February is my first favorite month because it's my birthday month. And it's not, my birthday's not until 22nd, but trust me, I celebrate it the whole time. Remember when we started this show was in February, because I remember talking about leap year and why it makes no sense. I digress. October, it's always been my favorite month ever since I was a little kid, because as a little kid, I was a big NBA fan. That was my sport. I loved the NBA as a kid. And October always got me excited because it was the start of training camp. And you know what? Everybody else focused on football. And trust me, I love football, love college football, love the NFL. Browns drive me crazy. Don't get me started on them. But I've always felt back then, there wasn't social media. There wasn't much other than Terry Pluto in the Beacon Journal at the time, the Akron Beacon Journal at the time. That was it. That was my NBA coverage. Sports Illustrated came every Thursday, and they'd have nothing on the NBA until the actual season started. So I always loved October because I felt like it was my month, because I'm the only person in the world, when you're a kid, if you think this way, the only person in the world paying attention to the NBA in October. And it was just, it's great fun for me. And guess what? I still get excited about it as a guy who spends 60 to 80% to 90% of my days writing, talking, and thinking about the NBA. And I still get excited. So thank you all for keeping me employed and doing what I love, because you're the absolute only reason I'm able to do this. So before I get too sappy and get too far off on a tangent, I want to let you know that when I went to the CAVS practice facility, I was rushing up to get up there. The press conference was at 10 a.m. I was kind of rushing around this morning trying to get a couple things on the website. And then the next thing I noticed, it's like, wow, I got to go. So I left, did not have a coffee. I got to the practice facility. The Cavs have a Keurig there. I was all excited, went straight to the Keurig, got the little pod, put it in there, hit it, and they're like, yeah, it's not working. I'm like, what? Why did I come all the way up here if your Keurig isn't even going to work? So I will be drinking coffee throughout the program because it's my first cup of the day, and I fully intend to enjoy it. Okay, so what did Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson have to say beyond the fact that they went to beyond the fact that the training camp's going to be in Florida? And it's just, look, the Browns did it. They do it in Greenbrier, West Virginia. And I just saw a story about Donovan Mitchell, by the way. Sorry, I got distracted. But, and it's nothing big. But, they talked about really the big question with the Cavs, right, is how they didn't sign any outside free agents, standard contracts. They didn't make any trades this offseason. They didn't do anything but hire Kenny Atkinson as their new coach and draft Jalen Tyson at number 20. They signed a couple guys to two-way contracts, two new guys. JT Thor, former, I believe he was a second-round pick, big guy from last played with the Charlotte Hornets. He played for South Sudan in the Olympics. Big guy who's really got he's very raw in terms of his offensive skills. He's not, but he's a great athlete. He's 6'10", can run and jump and finish around the basket, lefty. And his agent, Aaron Turner, is from Orange, Ohio, as I've covered on this podcast before. I think that might have played a role in his client, JT Thor, coming to Cleveland. The other two-way contract signings, Monty Bates, who had been already with the team last year. Cavs are still trying to develop him. And then Luke Travers from Australia, who the Cavs drafted a couple years ago. He stayed in Australia. Now he's made his way to the States. He's played with the Cavs in Summer League. So all those guys are guys that, the whole reason you have two-way contracts in the G League is because you want to develop these guys into serviceable rotation NBA players moving forward at some point. Isaiah Mobley is not back, which is interesting. Evan Mobley's brother, who was finished last year on two-way contract. I don't think Isaiah signed with anybody. He could potentially come to camp with the Cavs. The Cavs have not released their full camp roster. But the big question for both Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson was why no moves? I've said that on the podcast many times. Cavs are one of 3 teams that did not sign an outside free agent or make a trade. The other one, the Los Angeles Lakers, LeBron. That's real interesting. They didn't do anything but draft Dalton Connect. I don't know. The kid from Tennessee. He's a fine player. Probably be a rotation piece for them. And then, of course, Bronny James in the second round. And the other team would be the reigning champion Boston Celtics, who didn't need to make a move. They made their big moves last summer when they got Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday. Then, of course, went on to win the championship. Didn't need to make any moves. The Cavs, a lot of people thought they needed to make some moves. A lot of people thought, hey, they need a 6'7", 6'8" wing shooter to come in and play next to Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. Koby Altman addressed that. And he said, look, we're still a young team. And for the most part, you look at our core, we're pretty young still. And he said, in order to build something, you can't keep changing pieces. And you want to try to get these guys to the next step, right? Under J.B. Bickerstaff, last 3 years, they went to the play-in tournament, lost there, didn't have Jared Allen. The first round of the playoffs, lost there against the Knicks, just a much more experienced Knicks team. And then last year, beat Orlando in the first round, did not look good, even though they won that series, 7 games. And then lost to the Celtics, didn't have Jared Allen for the end of the Orlando series or any of the Boston series. We're missing Donovan Mitchell, for 1 or 2 games in that Boston series. So Koby Altman addressed that. He didn't come out and say J.B. Bickerstaff, but really, if you want to know why there's a coaching change, Koby Altman said, since we've had this group, starting with Darius Garland, believe it or not, Darius Garland is the longest tenured Cav. That's hard to believe, but he is. And Koby said, that's one of the things we want to avoid doing is we're changing faces so much that a guy like Darius Garland, who's 23 years old, is our longest tenured guy. He's like, so, we wanted to stick with familiarity and continuity and see where we can go, because we believe that, look, I wrote this yesterday. There are so many teams, forget the Western Conference, which is stacked. We're going to stick with the East since that's what the Cavs are in. There are so many teams that could be sleepers in the Eastern Conference. Yes, Boston's the favorite again. Yes, Philadelphia went out and got Paul George, Caleb Martin, Andre Drummond, Reggie Jackson, and Eric Gordon. Now, Paul George is the big move there. Caleb Martin the second. So that team looks great on paper. Yes, the Knicks went out and got Mikal Bridges. And the Knicks probably, if they had stayed healthy, probably would have gotten to the Eastern Conference Finals. But the NBA, because of these new rules, salary cap rules, you can't make these big splashy deals without impacting your future in terms of making moves. So if the Cavs went up against, layman's terms, they went up against this second tax apron, which everybody's talking about. So you could go over the salary cap, which teams have done for years. The Cavs have done that for years. And you know what? To owners, it's no big deal. We'll pay this. Fine. Pay whatever penalty. You're penalized a tax if you go over the salary cap. For years, owners are like, go over the cap, I'll pay the tax. It's not a big deal. to the NBA owners, them owning these teams are like us owning like a jet ski. I got to get repairs, no big deal for most of us. So that's how they are. You know, they look at it like, this is whatever I got to spend, that's fine. Well, now the new rules stipulate you can go over and pay that tax, that penalty tax, and that's fine. But now there's going to be a second salary cap that's above that. And if you go over that, if you meet that second salary cap, which isn't much, if you go over and hit that second cap, not only are you penalized like 10 times worse financially, but more than anything, it keeps you from, now it impacts, this new rule impacts general managers because it keeps you from making future trades. It keeps you from trading draft picks. You're penalized in terms of how you can build your roster. It doesn't just come down to money, because we saw that with the money, it's not an issue for the owners, so it didn't level the playing field. Now, my entire point of this is the NBA set out to level the playing field even more than ever. I mean, since the Bucks won the championship in 2021, the NBA has already had a lot of parity. We've had different teams in the finals every year. You had the Bucks winning it, the Warriors, their last gasp win. You know, they're not doing that anymore, not with Steve Kerr, Draymond Green, and Steph Curry. As great as those guys can be, their title days are done. Their playoff days may even be done. But where was I? Oh, so we had the Bucks, the Warriors, the Denver Nuggets, and the Miami Heat playing in the finals. And then we had, who else? Last year, the Celtics beating the Dallas Mavericks. So look, the Mavericks are a great kind of example of what the Cavs think they can do. The year before last, the Mavericks didn't make the playoffs. This year, they're in the finals. That's how wide open the NBA is. The Indiana Pacers, the year before, did not make the playoffs. Last year, they were in the Eastern Conference Finals. There's so much parity now, so much room for a sleeper, that the Cavs said, you know, you look at the Denver Nuggets 2 years ago, everybody was like, why are they keeping this roster together? They didn't make any moves. They can't, you know, they're not going anywhere with this current cast. And they went to the finals and won championship. A week before the Nuggets won the championship, 2 weeks before, in the playoffs, nobody predicted the Denver Nuggets and Miami Heat were going to the finals that year. Nobody predicted last year at the start of the playoffs that the Dallas Mavericks were going to go to the finals. So, you know, Kenny Atkinson said this. And I thought, okay, all right, let's see what you got. He said, continuity and having the same young roster back is a coach's dream. You want players who are familiar with each other. He's like, I feel like I'm entering this job, I'm paraphrasing here, a step ahead, because I don't have to worry about integrating a bunch of new players or even one big new player, big name new player. We got the same cast. They know each other. By all accounts, everybody really likes each other. And he called it a coach's dream. He said, we've got continuity and we've got youth. And he said, and we've got talent. And we've got, you know, and he's right. The Cavs have great depth. So, you know, he said that too. And so all of those reasons and more are why the Cavs opted not to make any changes. And you know what? They explored some stuff, but nobody was willing to come at the right price, whether that was a free agent or an opposing team willing to make a trade. You know, all off season, we heard the name Cam Johnson from the Brooklyn Nets, who's that 6'8" knockdown shooter. Well, the Nets won a bunch of draft picks for Cam Johnson, and they want players, and they want good players, good young players. The Cavs Cavs don't have draft picks to give, and they're certainly not going to give them Evan Mobley or, you know, Darius Garland. You can't do that. Now, you know, there's questions. There were questions at the press conference. Can Garland and Mitchell work? because, and I think it was Terry Pluto who asked it. He said, look, just from my own eyes, I watched them last year and they seemed to play better when Garland wasn't on the court. He just came out and said it. And he said sometimes when they play well when Garland was on the court, Mitchell wasn't. He was either injured or out of the game, taking a rest on the bench. So how are you going to fix that? And Kenny Atkinson said, well, I said this at the interview. I feel like we have two guys in the backcourt who should be all-stars, and it's bringing that out of Garland. He said, that's my job. That's why I was hired, because basically Kenny Atkinson said, I'm going to get the most out of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell together, and I'm going to get the most out of Jared Allen and Evan Mobley together. And that's going to work. And Kenny Atkinson said it right. He said, defensively, we're already really good. And he's right about that. With Allen and Mobley protecting the basket, that's probably, other than maybe, Karl Anthony Towns and Gobert, that's probably the biggest threat in the NBA when opposing teams are trying to score around the basket. And both those guys defend the pick and roll pretty well. They get out on shooters pretty well when big men have to do that. So defensively, the Cavs they're in a good spot. And they've got, Max Strus, who's tireless on defense. Isaac Okoro, Karis LeVert can play good defense. Dean Wade, when he's healthy, can play good defense. So I'm with them in the sense that don't just make a change to make a change. One Cavs fan texted me, he's like, come on, Cavs, do something this offseason. And I'm like, what? What are you going to do that's moving the needle? Don't make a trade unless it really moves the needle, at least on paper. Well, that trade wasn't out there. That free agent signing was not out there. I would have liked to have seen the Cavs maybe sign some veteran free agents to training camp contracts, like Talon Horton Tucker got with Chicago. He didn't get a guarantee to make the team. He got an invite to training camp. And he's a veteran player, wing player, young, good defender. I would have liked to have seen the Cavs made some of those signings. Killian Hayes, a former lottery pick who didn't work out in Detroit. He signed with the Nets, training camp deal. But again, is that moving the needle for you? Probably not. I got to take a sip. Sorry. My voice is going for some reason, which usually makes people happy. But when you're the only guy on a show, it can have a negative impact. So I think the Cavs, that was the big takeaway from the press conference for me, even though it was about 45 minutes, was, the camp in Florida is something they're trying. IMG Academy is just a great place. A lot of NFL teams will go down there and practice. So it's just a big place for teams to go. Great facility, built for professional teams, football and basketball. And the Cavs thought they'd give it a shot because nobody else had it booked. So it's a good way to try to, as Koby Altman said, kind of set the tone for the season and get the guys, very locked in together without any distractions. One thing I thought was real interesting about the press conference too was Kenny Atkinson talked a lot about, look, he talked a lot about the playoffs. He said making adjustments is such a huge thing for a coach within the game and between games. And he said, that's really, I was stunned how much Kenny Atkinson talked about the playoffs and basically saying that the Cavs are going to be there. So it's important that they prepare. And one thing Koby Altman said was the Cavs, since Darius Garland, really since this era here, and Donovan Mitchell, we have not been at our best. You're supposed to ascend after the second half of the season. And the Cavs have not done that. Koby Altman just came out and said that. He said, we've not played well after the All-Star break. We've not played our best when you need to, when it means the most in the playoffs. Donovan Mitchell addressed that the other day. We ran it on the website, and he said, against Orlando, I felt like we should have won that series a lot easier than we did. And he said it was just shouldn't have happened. Shouldn't have had to go 7 games against an Orlando team. Nothing against them, but we're first year in the playoffs. We're very young, and we're heavy underdogs. And the Cavs had to kind of clunk their way to Game 7 wins, and they were terrible in Orlando. All 3 games in Orlando just got blown out. And, Donovan Mitchell's upset about that. Koby Altman clearly upset about that. He's right. In each of the last 3 years, even though I said play-in tournament, first round, second round, Cavs have not been as good in the second half of the season. And that's what Kenny Atkinson was brought in for. And look, the Cavs didn't make any changes, right? But you have all the way until February at the trade deadline to make some, if you feel the need. But now, bring a new coach in, totally new system offensively. Totally new voice. This is nothing against JB Bickerstaff, who I have said I think he's going to do magnificent with the Pistons. But, and by the way, Pistons just signed Lamar Stevens. Remember him from the Cavs? Spent his first 3 years under JB Bickerstaff. Well, now he's going to JB Bickerstaff again in Detroit. So that was the one Cavs connection. I know the Pistons did call the Cavs on Isaac Okoro, but got nowhere. But the goal is now, new coach, we believe we're going to take it a step further. And Kenny Atkinson came out and said it. He said the whole regular season is about keeping a positive culture, which Cavs have, and building that for the playoffs. So it's almost like the preseason, the regular season, because their whole goal is to be at their absolute best during the playoffs. And I think that the Cavs now have a coach who can match up with the likes of Tom Thibodeau, Eric Spoelstra, Joe Mazzulla, Doc Rivers, who takes a lot of flack, but I think he's a good coach in Milwaukee. I think Kenny Atkinson is one of those guys who can match strategies, wits, rotations, adjustments with those guys. And it doesn't matter what I think. The Cavs think that. They believe it to be true. And they believe that will be enough with good health to get them to where they want to go. So that really about covers the gist of the press conference. Kenny Atkinson went into detail about not too great detail, didn't want to give away all his secrets, but that he truly believes, he said, I wouldn't have taken the job if I thought Mitchell and Garland couldn't work, or Allen and Mobley couldn't work. The whole reason he took the job was because he's like, I can make this work to a point where it's never worked before. And Kenny Atkinson talked a lot about Evan Mobley, and we really got to get him to another level offensively this year. And not just scoring points. He's a really good facilitator. He's got that potential. We've seen that in Evan Mobley. Facilitate, move the ball, pass. He's like, because so many times teams scout you to death, so they take away option 1, 2, 3, and then somebody's got to make a play, And Mobley's not like Giannis Antetokounmpo, where you get him the ball and he just goes downhill and scoring a basket, going straight to the hoop. Mobley's more, I guess I would say his game is a little more measured than that, a little more tempered. He's more kind of cerebral. So Atkinson wants to bring that out as much as he can. But I think, look, I had no problems with anything the Cavs did. I think that, or didn't do. I think it's going to be, number one, be real interesting to see how this team develops. I don't think it's going to happen with a snap of the fingers. I don't think the Cavs are going to go 18-0 to start. I think it's going to be an adjustment. And player personalities and coaching personalities, everything's different. So I think that's, there's a little bit of an adjustment there. They could rush right out of the gate, but that's not what you're looking for either. Last year, they won 17-18 in what, January, late December, and throughout January. Doesn't mean anything. It was nice. It was great, but it didn't really mean anything. So, they want to be at their best when it means the most, which, to quote Kevin McHale, the Celtics legend from many, many years ago, he said, all that matters is that you play well in May and June. Now, you got to play well enough to get there. But his point is, that's when you need to be at your best. And you know what? I think maybe that's when this show will be at its best. Well, I hope before that. I hope we're before that. Okay, real quick media update. We saw, obviously, the huge news that Adrian Wojnarowski was retired from the industry to go to St. Bonaventure, take that job. Now Zach Lowe, who's one of their top NBA insiders, was laid off yesterday at ESPN, which was stunning. Zach's not going to have any trouble finding another job, whether it be at The Athletic or The Ringer. Amazon Sports and NBC Sports are going to be hiring a ton of people because they're starting with the NBA in 2025. And I think that's, so Zach's not going to have any problem. What's going to be interesting is to see how things shake out at ESPN. We ran a story in that they might not replace Woj. They might just cover the NBA by committee, which if you're having to lay off Zach Lowe, then I would think that would probably be the wisest financial thing to do. The other thing directly impacts the Cavs. The other media note that I have directly impacts the Cavs. I've heard that this is going to be the last year for them on Bally Sports. Those are just sources. It's not anything that comes from the Cavs or Bally Sports directly, but I'm pretty confident in saying that this is probably going to be the last year for Bally Sports. Keep an eye on this Rocket. I think it's called Rocket Sports. It's only on like Access Cable. The Charge games are going to be on there. Dan Gilbert owns it. Charge games are on there. They're already broadcasting high school football games. It's called Rocket Sports. And I have no idea where you can find it. I don't have it on I have YouTube TV. It's not on there. I'm guessing that if the Cavs do make the move from Bally Sports to Rocket Sports, and why wouldn't they when Dan Gilbert owns that channel and the Charge are going on there this year, almost like a tune-up? I think that's where the Cavs are going to be. And if so, they would be on a lot more streaming services and outlets. But I know many of you will take great delight in the fact that this would be the last year on Bally Sports because so many of you aren't able to access Bally Sports. I can't either. I have YouTube TV. So I have to find creative ways to watch Cavs road games that I don't attend, which is these days barely any. Maybe Detroit. I go up to maybe Indiana, Washington, a couple other places, but not many. So yeah, that about covers it. We're going to have so much more. Obviously, with really things tipping off here, right? I mean, this press conference was just the start of the 24-25 season. Now I'll be going, be busy. I already got 5 hours of sleep last night. Playing on a lot more of that, and I love it because that means I'm not sitting here waiting for something to write, talk about, or interrupt with random sips of coffee. So I thought I'd squeeze that last sip in before we end. So thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate you following along, and we will talk to you again next week. See you then.